My name is Audrey Mitchell, 28 years old, standing in my living room clutching a pristine ivory envelope. My hands tremble as I read the wedding invitation from my sister Stephanie and my ex-fiancé James. 6 months ago, they were barely acquaintances, now they're getting married. This invitation feels more like a challenge than a genuine desire for my presence. Before I tell you what happened when I finally confronted them, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join me on this journey of betrayal and unexpected strength. Growing up with Stephanie was like living in the shadow of a firework. 2 years younger than me, she always commanded attention wherever she went. We were close as children, sharing secrets under blanket forts and defending each other from playground bullies. But as we entered our teens, a subtle competition took root between us. Our parents didn't help the situation. "Why can't you be more outgoing like your sister?" They'd ask me when I preferred reading to parties. Then they'd turn to Stephanie. "Audrey already has her college applications finished. When are you starting yours?" We became the contrasts by which the other was defined. I was the responsible, steady one with careful plans and a practical outlook. Stephanie was spontaneous, charming, and effortlessly popular. Despite this, we maintained a relationship that seemed close on the surface. We called regularly, spent holidays together, and to outsiders we were the picture of sisterly devotion. I believed that too, until James came into the picture. I met James Cooper at my friend Madison's housewarming party 3 years ago. He was standing by the bookshelf, examining her collection with genuine interest rather than mingling with the louder crowd in the kitchen. Something about his focused expression drew me in. "Find anything worth reading?" I asked, approaching with 2 glasses of wine. He looked up, startled, then smiled, a warm, slow smile that reached his eyes. "Actually, yes, your friend has excellent taste." He held up a dog-eared copy of my favorite novel. "That's actually mine," I admitted. "I lent it to Madison years ago. I'm surprised she still has it." "Then you have excellent taste," he said, accepting the wine I offered. "I'm James, by the way, James Cooper." "Audrey Mitchell." That simple exchange sparked 3 hours of conversation that felt like minutes. James was thoughtful and articulate, a civil engineer who loved his work designing bridges. "There's something poetic about creating connections between places," he told me. By the end of the night, he had my number. Our courtship was steady and intentional. James pursued me with a persistence that was flattering without being overwhelming. On our first date, he took me to a small gallery showing by a local artist I'd mentioned liking. On our third, he cooked dinner, nothing fancy, but the effort touched me. By our 5th date, I was falling in love. 2 years later, on a crisp autumn day at the lake where we'd spent our first summer together, James proposed. He'd arranged a picnic at sunset, and as the light turned golden across the water, he pulled out a small velvet box. "Audrey," he said, his voice slightly unsteady, "you've become the foundation of my life. You're the first person I want to tell when something good happens, and the only person I want beside me when things get hard. Will you marry me?" The ring was perfect, a simple solitaire diamond set in white gold, exactly what I would have chosen myself. I said yes through happy tears, and we spent the evening making plans for our future, wrapped in a bubble of joy that felt impenetrable. When we told my family, Stephanie's reaction should have been my first warning. She hugged me tightly, but as she pulled away, I caught something in her expression, a flicker of something that wasn't quite happiness. "Wow, settling down already," she said, examining my ring. "You're so young." "I'm 27, I reminded her. "Exactly," she laughed, but there was an edge to it. "I can't imagine being tied down right now." I dismissed her comments as typical Stephanie, always valuing freedom and spontaneity over stability. James seemed to get along well with my sister, laughing at her outrageous stories and engaging warmly with her. I was pleased they liked each other. It never occurred to me that they might like each other too much. In those early days of our engagement, life felt perfect. I was advancing in my career as an architectural designer, working long hours on a development project that could mean a promotion. James was supportive, understanding when I needed to work late, bringing dinner to my office on particularly busy nights. We began planning a wedding for the following spring, setting up a joint account for expenses, discussing honeymoon destinations. Looking back, there were signs I missed. The way Stephanie would call more frequently after our engagement, how she'd ask detailed questions about my relationship with James, the times she'd mention running into him by coincidence at coffee shops or stores. I attributed it all to her genuine interest in my happiness and her natural sociability. I trusted James completely. I trusted my sister. The thought that either would betray me never crossed my mind until it was impossible to ignore. The first real change I noticed was about 8 months into our engagement. James began working later, coming home with his shirt smelling of unfamiliar cologne. He grew distant, often lost in thought during our conversations. When I'd ask what was wrong, he'd snap back to attention with a too bright smile. "Nothing's wrong, just tired from work," became his standard response. His phone, once casually left around our apartment, was suddenly always in his pocket or face down when he set it aside. One morning, while he was in the shower, I saw a notification flash across his screen, a message from Stephanie with a heart emoji. Something cold settled in my stomach. But I pushed the feeling away. They were practically family now, surely some affection was normal. "I saw Stephanie texted you," I mentioned casually as he dressed for work. A flash of something guilt crossed his face before he shrugged. "Oh yeah, she was asking about birthday gift ideas for you." My birthday was 4 months away. That weekend, James said he needed to work on a Saturday to catch up on a project. I decided to surprise him with lunch, picking up sandwiches from his favorite deli. When I arrived at his office building, the security guard looked confused. "Mr. Cooper, he hasn't been in today," he said, checking the log, "or any Saturday this month." The cold feeling returned, stronger now. I called James, who answered on the 4th ring. "Hey, where are you? I thought you were at the office." A pause. "I am. Why?" "That's strange, because I'm standing in your lobby and they say you haven't been here all day." Another pause, longer this time. "I had to go to the site instead. Some issues with the foundation. Why are you checking up on me?" The accusation in his tone made me defensive. "I'm not checking up on you. I brought you lunch." His voice softened. "That's sweet, but you should have called first." That night I tried to talk to him about the distance I was feeling. "You seem somewhere else lately. If something's wrong, we should discuss it." "Nothing's wrong," he insisted, an edge creeping into his voice. "You're imagining things. You've been so wrapped up in your work. Maybe you're projecting." "Projecting what?" I asked, confused. "Your own distraction. I'm the same as always, Audrey." But he wasn't, and neither was Stephanie. She began dropping by our apartment unannounced, always with some flimsy excuse. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd see if you wanted to look at these wedding magazines," she'd say, though she lived across town. She started offering to help with wedding planning, something she'd shown zero interest in before. She'd volunteer to meet with vendors when I was busy, insisting it was no trouble at all. I was grateful for her help, interpreting it as a sign of our strengthening bond. Then came the restaurant incident. I had a rare free evening, having finished a major project phase. I decided to try a new bistro downtown that Madison had recommended. As the hostess led me to my table, I froze. In a dimly lit corner sat James and Stephanie, leaning toward each other in intimate conversation. His hand covered hers on the table. I stepped back before they could see me and asked the hostess for a different table where I could observe them without being noticed. For 30 minutes I watched them. They weren't behaving like a future brother-in-law and sister-in-law. The way Stephanie tossed her hair, the way James's eyes followed her movements, the secretive smiles they shared, it was unmistakably romantic. When I confronted them outside the restaurant, they had a ready explanation. "We're planning your surprise birthday party," Stephanie said quickly. "Way to ruin it." "In April?" I asked. "My birthday is 4 months away." "We're thinking big," James added. "Lots to organize." I wanted to believe them. I needed to believe them, so I did, or pretended to. But Madison wasn't convinced when I told her about it the next day. "That's weird, Audrey," she said, frowning. "Really weird. And I've noticed how Stephanie looks at James at family gatherings, like she's sizing up something she wants to buy." "She's my sister," I protested weakly. "Which should make him even more off limits," Madison pointed out. More signs accumulated. Stephanie began dressing differently when she knew James would be around, slightly more revealing tops, extra time on her makeup. James would find excuses to leave the room when his phone rang, returning with flushed cheeks. They developed inside jokes I wasn't part of. Sleep became elusive. I'd lie awake beside James, listening to his breathing and wondering if he was dreaming of my sister. During the day I was distracted at work, missing details I normally caught easily. My boss noticed. "Everything okay at home, Audrey?" she asked after I submitted a design with obvious errors. "Just wedding stress," I lied, though we'd barely done any planning for weeks. I started checking James's phone when he was in the shower, hating myself for it but unable to stop. He's deleted his text threads with Stephanie, which seemed more suspicious than if he's kept innocent messages. The evidence was mounting, but I still didn't have proof. Part of me didn't want it. If I didn't know for certain, I could still pretend everything was fine. We could still have our spring wedding, our life together, the future I'd planned so carefully. Then came the day I found the photos. It was a Sunday afternoon. James had gone to meet a client. another in his growing list of weekend work commitments. I was using his laptop to look through wedding venue photos we'd saved, trying to recapture some enthusiasm for planning, when I opened his downloads folder looking for the venue files. I found a different folder simply labeled S. I knew I shouldn't open it, some part of me already knew what I would find, but I clicked anyway. Dozens of photos filled the screen, Stephanie in lingerie, posing on what I recognized as the bed in her apartment, Stephanie and James together, his hands on her body, their lips locked in passionate kisses, selfies of them in hotel rooms. The timestamp showed some dated back 3 months. My hands shook so badly I knocked a glass of water onto the keyboard. I didn't move to clean it up. I just sat there, watching water seep between the keys, feeling like I was dissolving along with the computer. When James came home that evening, I was sitting in the dark living room, his laptop open on the coffee table, the incriminating photos on display. The screen had dried out enough to work for what I needed. "Audrey," he called, flipping on the light, "why are you sitting in the dark?" Then he saw the laptop, the color drained from his face. "I can explain," he started, but I cut him off. "How long?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. He sank onto the couch opposite me. "Audrey, it just happened. We never meant to." How long? Each word felt like glass in my throat. James ran his hands through his hair. "A few months since your company retreat in July. 4 months, while I was away for a weekend team-building event. My fiancé and my sister had started an affair." "I want details," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "Every detail." "Do you really think that will help?" he asked. "I think you owe me the truth." So he told me how Stephanie had invited him for drinks while I was away just to keep him company, how one drink led to several, how she'd confessed she'd always been attracted to him, how he'd been flattered, then intrigued, how one kiss led to more. "We tried to stop," he claimed, "multiple times, but there's something between us, Audrey, a connection I can't explain." "Try," I said coldly. He stumbled through explanations that sounded rehearsed. They shared the same sense of humor, the same outlook on life, the same spontaneous spirit. Everything that made me different from my sister was apparently what drew him to her. "I'm calling her," I said, reaching for my phone. "Audrey, don't." But I was already dialing. Stephanie answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. "He told me everything," I said without preamble. A pause, then, not the tearful apology I might have expected, but a sigh that sounded almost like relief. "It's probably for the best," she said. This was getting too complicated. "Complicated?" I repeated, disbelieving. "You're sleeping with my fiancé and it's complicated." "I didn't plan this, Audrey, neither of us did, but you have to admit, you and James were never really right for each other. You're so focused on your career, so controlled all the time. He needs someone more spontaneous, more like you." I finished for her. "Yes," she said simply. I hung up, turned to James, who was watching me with a mixture of guilt and what looked disturbingly like impatience. "Get out," I said quietly. "Audrey, we should talk about this more, figure out how to move forward." "Move forward," I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "The only one moving is you, out of this apartment, tonight." "This is my apartment too," he protested. "The lease is in my name. Your name is on a wedding venue contract we're going to cancel tomorrow. Pack what you need for tonight, you can get the rest when I'm at work." Something in my tone must have convinced him I was serious. He packed a bag in silence, taking only clothes and toiletries. At the door he paused. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never meant to hurt you." "Yet here we are," I replied. "Goodbye, James." After he left, the apartment fell into a silence so complete I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I sat motionless until dawn, my mind cycling through memories, reinterpreting them with my new knowledge. All those late nights, the secretive phone calls, the coincidental meetings, the signs had been there all along. When morning came, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Then I threw up until there was nothing left in my stomach. My body seemed to be physically rejecting the betrayal. My phone rang constantly. James, Stephanie, my parents. I answered none of them. Madison came over with soup and wine, holding me while I alternated between numb silence and racking sobs. "I should have seen it," I kept saying. "How did I not see it?" "Because you trusted them," Madison said simply. "That's not your failure, it's theirs." My parents showed up unannounced the next day. They'd heard Stephanie's version of events already, which apparently cast her and James as star-crossed lovers who'd fought their feelings valiantly before succumbing to an irresistible connection. "We know you're hurt," my mother said, sitting primly on the edge of my sofa. "But these things happen, Audrey. Maybe if you hadn't been working so much." "Are you seriously blaming me for my fiancé cheating with my sister?" I asked incredulously. No one's blaming you, my father interjected, but relationships take work and investment. I was working to build our future, I said, a future he was apparently planning with someone else. Stephanie's very upset, my mother continued as if I hadn't spoken. She feels terrible about how this happened. Not terrible enough to stay away from my fiancé. My parents exchanged glances. We were hoping you could be the bigger person here, my father said. Family is family, when all is said and done. I stared at them, these people who had raised me, now asking me to accept the ultimate betrayal with good grace. For the first time I saw clearly how they had always subtly favored Stephanie, excused her behavior, expected me to accommodate her whims. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Audrey. Now please. After they left, I blocked everyone's numbers except Madison's. I took a week off work, using vacation days I'd been saving for my honeymoon. I barely ate, barely slept. Friends called, unsure what to say or whose side to take in this messy family drama. Some suggested I'd been too busy with work, echoing my parents' implied criticism. Others were outraged on my behalf but seemed to expect a dramatic confrontation I didn't have the energy for. I felt completely alone, adrift in a life I no longer recognized. 3 months passed. I threw myself into work with an intensity that alarmed my colleagues but impressed my boss. I was assigned to lead a major commercial development project, the promotion I'd been working toward, arriving just when my personal life imploded. Are you sure you can handle this right now? My boss asked gently. Work is the only thing that makes sense, I told her honestly. I nearly lost the project anyway. In a crucial client meeting, I found myself staring blankly at questions directed my way. My mind suddenly flooded with images of James and Stephanie together. My assistant covered admirably, but afterward my boss suggested I speak with someone. The company insurance covers therapy, she reminded me. There's no shame in getting help, Audrey. So I started seeing Dr. Chen, a calm, direct woman who helped me name what I was feeling, not just heartbreak, but complex betrayal trauma. The double loss of my fiancé and my sister had shattered my sense of safety and trust. Healing isn't linear, Dr. Chen told me in our sessions. Some days will be better than others. Your job is to keep moving forward, even when it's just inches at a time. I was having one of those better days when the invitation arrived, a cream-colored envelope with elegant calligraphy addressing it to Ms. Audrey Mitchell and guest. Inside, an ornate card announced, Stephanie Ann Mitchell and James Edward Cooper request the honor of your presence as they unite in marriage. The wedding date was just 2 months away. They hadn't wasted any time. Tucked inside was a handwritten note from Stephanie. Audrey, I know this is unconventional, but family means everything to me. Your presence would mean the world to us both and show real maturity on your part. This could be the first step in healing our family. Mom and Dad agree. Please come. Love always, Steph. I sat on my kitchen floor and laughed until I cried, then cried until I had nothing left. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. They were getting married at the same venue James and I had selected. The invitation style was nearly identical to what we had chosen together. My phone rang. My mother, calling from an unknown number to circumvent my blocking. Did you get the invitation? She asked without preamble. Hello to you too, Mom. Audrey, don't be difficult. Did you get it? Yes, I said, suddenly exhausted. I got the invitation to watch my sister marry my ex-fiancé. Oddly enough, I don't feel like celebrating that particular union. This coldness doesn't suit you, she said disapprovingly. We're a family. Families forgive. Some things are unforgivable. Nothing is unforgivable if you try hard enough, she insisted. Your absence would create a rift that might never heal. Is that what you want? I didn't create this rift, I reminded her. Stephanie and James did. They made a mistake, but they're trying to make it right by including you. I nearly laughed again. Including me as what? A cautionary tale? The sad ex watching from the back row? As family, she said firmly. Think about it, Audrey, for all our sakes. After she hung up, I received a text from James. I know this is awkward, but it would mean a lot to have your blessing. I'm sorry for how things happened. We still care about you deeply. Though we felt like a slap. Once there had been a different we, James and I, planning our future. Now I was on the outside of a relationship built on the ruins of my own. That evening I logged onto social media for the first time in months. There they were, Stephanie and James's engagement photos, prominently displayed. They were posed at the lake where he had proposed to me, standing on the same dock, backlit by the same sunset. Stephanie wore a white sundress eerily similar to one I owned, which James had always complimented. They had not only taken my future but were now rewriting my past, replacing me in my own memories. The comments were effusive, such a beautiful couple, perfect match, can't wait for the wedding. Friends who had known about my engagement, who had congratulated me just months earlier, now celebrated this new relationship without acknowledging its painful origins. Madison called just as I was considering throwing my phone through the window. "I saw," she said, "those tacky photos at your special place, and the invitation. Please tell me you're not going." "My mother thinks I should, for family harmony." "Your mother needs a reality check," Madison said bluntly. "This is messed up, Audrey. They're not just asking you to attend, they're asking you to validate what they did." "Maybe I should go," I said, surprising myself. "Show everyone I'm fine, that they didn't break me." "Are you fine?" she asked gently. I wasn't, not even close. "What if we plan a trip instead?" Madison suggested. "The weekend of the wedding we could be on a beach somewhere, phones off, drinking something with tiny umbrellas in it." The alternative was tempting, but something in me rebelled at the thought of running away, of being erased from the narrative so Stephanie and James could enjoy their perfect day without facing the consequences of their actions. I didn't give Madison an answer. I didn't know what I wanted to do yet. The following week, another envelope arrived, an invitation to Stephanie's bridal shower. This one included a note asking me to co-host. Since I was still her only sister, the presumption took my breath away. The bridal shower invitation became a tipping point. I brought it to my next therapy session, hands shaking as I showed Dr. Chen. "She wants me to co-host," I said, disbelieving, "to stand beside her and smile while our friends give her gifts for her life with my ex-fiancé." Dr. Chen studied the invitation. "What does this request bring up for you?" "Rage," I admitted, "pure rage, but also confusion. Part of me wants to go to the wedding, not the shower. That's a step too far, but the wedding, to see it for myself, to make it real so I can finally move on. And perhaps to reclaim your power in the situation?" I nodded slowly. "Maybe right now I feel like they've written me out of the story, the wounded ex too broken to face them, if I show up." "You changed the narrative," she finished. "But another part of me thinks it's self-destructive. Why put myself through that? Why give them the satisfaction of my presence, my tacit approval?" In the weeks that followed, this internal debate consumed me. My parents called daily, their messages growing increasingly manipulative. "Stephanie cried all evening about your absence," my mother reported. "Your father's blood pressure is rising from all this stress," she said another time. "My father tried a different approach. You were always the sensible one, Audrey, the responsible one. The family needs that now." Meanwhile, Stephanie sent photos of her dress fittings to my email as if we were still close. "What do you think of this one?" she'd write, attaching images of herself in white gowns, beaming in boutique fitting rooms, surrounded by friends who had once been mutual. James vacillated between apologetic texts, "I never meant for any of this to happen," and presumptuous ones, "It would really help everyone move forward if you came." The dreams were the worst. Night after night I stood frozen in a church while they exchanged vows, unable to speak or move. Sometimes I was invisible, screaming objections no one could hear. Other times I was wearing my old engagement ring, which grew heavier until it pulled me through the floor. I'd wake gasping, drenched in sweat, reaching for someone who wasn't there. Dr. Chen helped me recognize the patterns of manipulation. "Notice how everyone is making their feelings your responsibility," she pointed out. "Your sister's tears, your father's blood pressure, James's desire to alleviate his guilt, they're placing the burden of their emotional well-being on you." It's always been that way, I realized. I was always expected to be the reasonable one, to accommodate, to understand. "And now you're questioning that role?" "Yes," I said, for the first time. Madison remained firmly in the absolutely not camp regarding wedding attendance. She'd organized an alternative weekend in a rented beach house with a few loyal friends. "Sun, sand, supportive people who aren't betraying trash monsters," she pitched, "versus watching your sister marry your ex while your parents pretend everything's fine." Put that way, the choice seemed obvious, yet still I hesitated. I wrote multiple server responses. "Audrey Mitchell regrets that she will be unable to attend. Audrey Mitchell is pleased to accept. Audrey Mitchell would rather walk barefoot through broken glass." I sent none of them. The project at work entered a critical phase, demanding my complete focus. For hours each day, I could lose myself in technical details and creative solutions, temporarily forgetting the chaos of my personal life. My team responded to my new intensity, elevating their own performance. The client was impressed with our progress. "Whatever's driving you, it's working," my boss commented after a particularly successful presentation. What was driving me? Determination not to let betrayal define my life, or the desperate need for distraction? Small victories began to accumulate. I joined a weekend hiking group, finding solace in physical exertion in the company of strangers who knew nothing of my history. I redecorated my apartment, removing all traces of James and creating a space that was wholly mine. I tried a cooking class, discovering I had talent for complex recipes that required precise attention, the same focus I brought to architectural plans. Dr. Chen noted these positive steps. "You're rebuilding," she said, "creating a life that doesn't revolve around your trauma." Yet the wedding invitation still sat on my counter unanswered. The deadline for resvoops came and went. My mother called, frantic. "They need a final headcount for the caterer, Audrey. Are you coming or not?" "I haven't decided," I told her truthfully. "This indecision isn't fair to anyone," she scolded, "especially Stephanie. It's her special day." Something in me snapped. "It was supposed to be my special day first," I said, an edge in my voice, "with my fiancé, before my sister decided to sleep with him." "That's all in the past now," my mother said dismissively. "You need to move forward." "Moving forward doesn't mean pretending nothing happened." "No one's asking you to pretend, just to be civil, to be family." After that call, I received another invitation, this one to Stephanie's bachelorette party the following weekend. The presumption was staggering. Each new invitation felt less like an olive branch and more like a taunt, a challenge to prove I was over it by celebrating their relationship. I brought the bachelorette invitation to my next therapy session. "I feel like I'm being tested," I told Dr. Chen, "like they're pushing to see how much I'll take before I break." "Or perhaps," she suggested, "they're seeking your approval to alleviate their own guilt." "Well, they don't have it," I said firmly, "and they never will." "Have you told them that directly?" I hadn't. I'd withdrawn, blocked numbers, avoided confrontation. Perhaps that's why they continued pushing. My silence left room for them to write their own narrative. That evening I unblocked Stephanie's number and called her. She answered immediately. "Audrey, I'm so glad you called. Did you get the bachelorette invitation? It's going to be so fun." "I'm not coming to your bachelorette party," I interrupted, "or your bridal shower, or your wedding." Silence on the line. "Then Mom said you were still deciding about the wedding." "I've decided I won't be there." Her voice turned cold. "So that's it? You're just cutting me out of your life forever because of a man?" The audacity stole my breath. "Not because of a man, Stephanie. Because you and James carried on an affair behind my back for months. Because neither of you had the decency to be honest with me. Because you're getting married 4 months after I found out, in the venue James and I chose. Sending me invitations like it's a normal family event." "People can't help who they fall in love with," she said, her voice taking on the wounded quality that had always worked with our parents. "They can help how they act on it," I countered. "You both made choices repeatedly. Now I'm making mine." After I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. The decision was made. I wouldn't attend any of the wedding events. I wouldn't give them my blessing or my presence. I would focus on my own healing instead. That resolve lasted exactly 2 weeks. Then my father showed up at my apartment, gray-faced and grim. "Your mother's beside herself," he said without greeting. "Your sister's heartbroken. This family is falling apart, and you're the only one who can fix it." "Why is it my responsibility to fix what they broke?" I asked. "Because you're stronger than they are," he said simply. "You always have been." He pulled out an ultimatum: either I attended the wedding or I would no longer be welcome at family gatherings. No holidays, no birthdays, no Sunday dinners. "You're choosing them over me," I said, hurt despite myself after what they did. "I'm choosing family peace," he corrected. "Sometimes that requires sacrifice." After he left, I called Madison in tears. "They're going to excommunicate me if I don't go." "Then let them," she said fiercely. "Build a new family of people who actually respect you." But the prospect of losing my entire family, damaged as it was, opened a fresh wound. For all their flaws, they were still my family. The thought of holidays alone, of my parents growing older without me, of complete disconnection, it was another loss on top of too many. The next morning I called my mother. "I'll come to the wedding," I said quietly, "but not the shower, not the bachelorette party, just the ceremony and reception, and I'll need some distance afterward to process." Her relief was palpable. "You're doing the right thing, Audrey, you'll see." I wasn't sure about that, but I'd made my decision. The morning of Stephanie and James's wedding dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day I had once imagined for my own wedding. I stood in my bathroom, applying makeup with shaking hands, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. Madison had offered to come as my +1, moral support disguised as a date, but I'd declined. This was something I needed to face alone. I chose my outfit carefully, a deep blue dress that I knew highlighted my eyes and complemented my dark hair, elegant but not flashy. I wanted to look composed, confident, not like someone nursing a broken heart. The venue was a restored historic mansion with manicured gardens, the same place James and I had put a deposit on for our wedding. As my Uber approached, I felt a surge of nausea. The driver gave me a concerned look in the rearview mirror. "Wedding or funeral?" he asked, noticing my expression. "Bit of both," I replied honestly. The grounds were decorated with white roses and silver ribbons, the color scheme Stephanie had helped me select for my wedding the year before, now repurposed for hers. The irony wasn't lost on me. Guests were already arriving, some doing double takes when they spotted me. I heard whispers follow me up the path to the mansion. "That's the sister, the ex-fiancé. Can you believe she came?" Inside, I slipped into a seat in the back row, wanting to observe without being observed. A cousin I hadn't seen in years approached, her expression a mix of sympathy and curiosity. "Audrey, we didn't think you'd come," she said, squeezing my arm. "Family obligation," I said with a tight smile. "Still, it's so brave of you." Brave wasn't how I felt. Numb was closer, detached, as if watching a movie about someone else's life. My parents spotted me and hurried over, relief evident in their expressions. My mother embraced me tightly. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "This means everything." My father patted my shoulder awkwardly. "You look nice, Audrey." "Thanks," I said, unable to summon more words. They led me to the family section, closer to the front than I wanted to be. I would have a perfect view of the ceremony, perfect for torture. The music began, the string quartet James and I had auditioned together now playing for his wedding to my sister. Guests settled into their seats. The officiant took his place, the same minister who had been scheduled to marry James and me. Then James appeared with his groomsmen, handsome in his tuxedo, looking nervous but happy. Our eyes met briefly across the room. He gave a small nod, which I didn't return. The bridesmaids processed in, several of them friends we had shared, now solely in Stephanie's camp. They avoided my gaze. The music shifted to the bridal march. Everyone stood, and there was Stephanie on our father's arm, radiant in a white gown, beaming at her soon-to-be husband. Something inside me cracked watching my father walk my sister down the aisle to marry my ex-fiancé. The absurdity, the betrayal, the complete rewriting of relationships had all crashed over me in that moment. The ceremony proceeded in a blur. Vows were exchanged. Rings, new ones, not mine, were placed on fingers, and then came the moment I'd dreaded. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The traditional words hung in the air. A heavy silence fell over the gathering. I felt eyes dart in my direction, anticipating drama, perhaps even hoping for it. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. I stood up. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Stephanie's face drained of color. James looked stricken. My mother half rose from her seat, ready to intervene. I took a deep breath. "I'm not here to object to this marriage," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "What's done is done, but I am here to speak my truth before this gathering of family and friends." The minister looked uncertain whether to proceed or wait. I continued before anyone could stop me. 8 months ago I was engaged to James. We were planning our wedding, our future, our life together. Then I discovered he was having an affair with my sister. Neither of them had the courage or respect to tell me to my face. I found out by discovering intimate photos on his computer. Murmurs swept through the crowd. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others leaned forward, riveted. I've been asked to pretend that none of this happened, to smile and celebrate as if my heart wasn't broken, my trust wasn't betrayed by the two people I loved most in the world. I've been told that family is family, and that I should forgive and forget for the sake of harmony. I looked directly at Stephanie, then at James. "I came today not to give my blessing but to reclaim my dignity. This wedding isn't a beautiful love story, it's built on betrayal, and while I won't stand in your way, I also won't pretend that what you did was anything but cruel." I turned to address the gathered guests. "Many of you knew what happened. Some of you were my friends too once, yet you're here celebrating this union without acknowledging its painful beginnings. That's your choice. Mine is to walk away with my head held high, to build a life where loyalty and honesty matter." I picked up my purse. "Congratulations on your wedding day. I hope you'll both reflect on how you got here and what it cost others. I won't be staying for the reception." With that, I walked steadily down the aisle and out the door, feeling dozens of eyes on my back but refusing to hurry or show weakness. Outside, in the bright spring sunlight, I took my first full breath in what felt like months. My phone began buzzing immediately. My mother, my father, cousins, former friends. I silenced it and ordered another Uber. As I waited, a handful of guests trickled out of the ceremony, approaching me with unexpected support. I always thought something wasn't right about how quickly they got together, said one of James's colleagues. That took courage, said an old family friend, squeezing my hand. By the time my car arrived, nearly a dozen people had left the wedding to express solidarity. Not everyone, not even most, but enough to know I hadn't been entirely alone in my perspective. At home, I kicked off my heels and changed into comfortable clothes. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony watching the sunset. My phone continued to light up with notifications, but I ignored them all except one, a text from Madison. Well, how did it go? I typed back. I spoke my truth and left, feeling surprisingly okay. She responded immediately, details needed, coming over with takeout. That night, as we sat surrounded by empty Chinese food containers, I felt the first real stirrings of freedom. I hadn't stopped their wedding, I hadn't wanted to, but I had refused to be a silent prop in their narrative, and in doing so I had begun to write my own. The fallout from my wedding speech was immediate and intense. My mother left a dozen voicemails, each progressively more distraught, accusing me of ruining Stephanie's special day out of spite. My father was more direct. That was uncalled for, Audrey, completely inappropriate. Stephanie sent a single text, I hope you're satisfied. James didn't contact me at all. Social media exploded with thinly veiled references to the incident. Some people just can't move on, wrote one of Stephanie's bridesmaids. Most dramatic wedding ever, posted another. But there were supportive messages too. Madison shared a photo of us from that evening, captioned simply, proud of this warrior. Former colleagues and friends I hadn't heard from in months reached out with words of encouragement. I deleted all social media apps from my phone and set firm boundaries. I informed my parents I would be taking a 6-month break from family gatherings to focus on my own healing. I blocked Stephanie's number and removed James's final possessions from my storage unit, donating what he hadn't claimed. Work became my sanctuary. The development project I was leading moved into its final phase, and my focus and creativity impressed both my team and our clients. 2 months after the wedding, I received a substantial promotion. Your resilience is remarkable, my boss told me. You've channeled everything into your work without letting it consume you. That wasn't entirely true. Work had consumed me initially, but I was learning balance. I joined a support group for people healing from betrayal trauma, finding solace in shared experiences. I maintained my therapy sessions with Dr. Chen, gradually spacing them further apart as I grew stronger. I made new friends through my hiking group, people who knew me only as I was now, not as half of a former couple or the betrayed sister. With them, I rediscovered simple pleasures, campfire conversations, summit views, the satisfaction of physical challenges overcome. Madison remained my rock, but our friendship evolved too. Instead of focusing on my trauma during our time together, we explored new restaurants, attended concerts, planned weekend trips. She never pressured me to date again, but gently encouraged me to remain open to possibilities. Not everyone is James, she reminded me. Not everyone will betray you. 6 months after the wedding, I received an unexpected call from a mutual friend. I thought you should know, she said hesitantly. Stephanie and James are having problems, serious ones. They're in counseling already. I was surprised by my lack of satisfaction at this news. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Their pain brought me no joy. Apparently there are trust issues, she continued. James caught Stephanie texting an ex. The irony wasn't lost on me, that I changed the subject. Their marriage was no longer my concern. A week later, my mother called from a new number, circumventing my blocking. I think we need to talk, she said, her voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. We met at a neutral cafe. She looked older, tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. Your father and I have been doing some reflecting, she began, surprising me. We didn't handle things well, Audrey. We were so focused on keeping the peace that we didn't acknowledge how deeply you were hurt. That's putting it mildly, I said, but without rancor. We should have supported you more, set better boundaries with Stephanie. She twisted her napkin. She's always been the squeaky wheel, and you've always been so self-sufficient. I think we took advantage of that. It wasn't a full apology, but it was more accountability than I'd ever heard from her. Thank you for saying that, I said carefully. It means a lot. Would you consider coming to Sunday dinner next week? Just us and your father. Stephanie and James won't be there. I agreed, cautiously optimistic about rebuilding a relationship with my parents on new, more honest terms. That dinner was awkward but not unpleasant. We carefully avoided certain topics, but my father asked genuine questions about my work, and my mother showed interest in my hiking group, small steps but meaningful ones. Nearly a year after the wedding, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Audrey, it's Stephanie. I got a new number. Can we meet, please?" After considerable thought and a consultation with Dr. Chen, I agreed to coffee in a public place. Stephanie looked different, subdued, less perfectly put together than usual. The sparkle that had always drawn people to her seemed dimmed. "James and I separated," she said without preamble. "He's moving out next week." "I'm sorry," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "Are you?" she asked, studying my face. "Yes, I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, not even you." She nodded slowly. "I deserve that. I deserve worse, actually." She took a deep breath. "I've been in therapy, working on why I did what I did. It wasn't really about James, you know." "What was it about?" "Competition, jealousy. I've always been jealous of you, Audrey. Your focus, your direction, the way you built a career you love, the way Mom and Dad respected you even when they worried about me." She twisted her wedding ring, which she still wore. "James was just a trophy, proof I could take something that was yours." The admission stunned me. I'd always thought of Stephanie as the favored one, the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. "That doesn't make it hurt any less," I said finally. "I know, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did, how selfish and cruel it was." She looked down at her coffee. "And I miss my sister." I didn't have an easy response for that. Part of me wanted to reach across the table and hold her hand, fall back into the comfort of sisterhood. Another part remembered the photos on James's computer, the wedding invitations, the months of manipulation. "I can't go back to how things were," I said honestly. "That relationship is gone, but maybe with time we can build something new, something with better boundaries and more respect." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an opening, a possibility. 1 year and 3 months after discovering the affair, I met someone new, Ryan, an environmental engineer who consulted on my development project. Our first conversation was about sustainable water systems, hardly romantic, but his passion for his work and his thoughtful questions about mine intrigued me. Our first date was nothing elaborate, just coffee after a project meeting, but it extended into lunch, then a walk through the park, then dinner. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences. "I'd like to see you again," he said as we parted. "No pressure, just, I enjoy talking with you." I found myself saying yes, and then yes again to a second date, and a third. I moved cautiously, transparent about my trust issues. Ryan was patient, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. He listened when I finally shared the full story of James and Stephanie, offering neither platitudes nor judgments, just understanding. "That's a lot to carry," he said simply. "Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me." Trust, it grew slowly, deliberately, a conscious choice rather than the blind faith I'd once given so freely. I learned to voice concerns instead of suppressing them, to ask difficult questions, to state my needs clearly. 2 years after the wedding that wasn't mine, I stood in my living room, a new apartment in a different neighborhood, looking at a photograph, not of James or Stephanie, but of myself on a mountain summit, arms raised in triumph, face alight with joy. It was my favorite image of myself, capturing a moment of pure accomplishment and freedom. "Madison had it framed for my 30th birthday, to remind you how far you've climbed," the card said. My phone chimed with a text from Ryan. "Dinner at 7, I'm cooking." I smiled and replied affirmatively, then noticed another message from Stephanie. We communicated occasionally now, cautious exchanges that carefully avoided certain topics. This one was simple: "Thinking of you today. Hope you're well." I responded with equal simplicity: "I am, thank you." And I was, not because the hurt had disappeared completely, some scars would always remain, but because I'd built a life that was authentically mine, filled with work that fulfilled me, relationships based on mutual respect, and a hard-won understanding of my own worth. The woman who stood up at that wedding to reclaim her dignity wasn't the same woman who had collapsed in tears upon discovering betrayal. She was stronger, wiser, more compassionate with herself and others. She had learned that speaking truth, however uncomfortable, was ultimately more healing than silence. As I prepared to leave for Ryan's apartment, I looked around my space, the architectural prints I'd chosen, the hiking memorabilia, the bookshelves filled with titles that interested me. Everything reflected choices I'd made for myself, not to accommodate someone else's preferences or expectations. I thought about how far I'd come, and how the journey, painful as it was, had led me to a more authentic life. I wondered how many others were silently enduring betrayal, swallowing their truth to keep the peace, sacrificing their dignity on the altar of family harmony. What would you do if faced with such a choice? Would you attend the wedding of your sister and ex-fiancé? Would you speak up or stay silent? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences and lessons learned the hard way. Remember, sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. Thank you for listening, and remember your worth is never dependent on someone else's ability to see it. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next video.